Science.
Ebola has been making front-page news around the world since the latest and largest ever outbreak of the disease started back in March. The West African nations of Sierra Leone, Guinea and Liberia are now counting thousands of dead. Euronews went to the Institut Pasteur in Paris, dedicated to the study of diseases and vaccines, to meet Jean-Claude Menuguera, one of the first to ring the alarm bells about the recent outbreak. He and his team are working on a test to rapidly detect the presence of Ebola in the body.
L'Ebola, c'est une maladie causée par un virus qu'on appelle le virus Ebola. Donc c'est une maladie qui commence brutalement par une fièvre.
Ebola is a disease caused by a virus called Ebola. It starts with a sudden fever, a bit like the flu, and then rapidly your throat and the rest of your body feel sore. Other symptoms that have nothing to do with the flu set in rapidly, like vomiting and diarrhea. There may also be bleeding, but not necessarily.
Des symptômes d'hémorragie, mais ça n'est pas obligatoire.
It's transmitted by physical contact, so it's different to the flu or measles and smallpox, which are airborne diseases. Here, you really need to have had physical contact with an infected person, or with the infected person's bodily fluids. There's been much talk about sweat. If there are no cuts and if the infected person's sweat contains no blood, then there's a very low chance of contagion. You can't catch the virus by shaking somebody's hand.
What is the situation in Europe?
In Europe, the situation is excellent. You know, this kind of virus usually targets people who are weak and takes root in countries without any healthcare system. Even though some cases of Ebola may be imported, it's virtually impossible for an epidemic to spread because we're very lucky. Again, unlike the flu, people with Ebola are not contagious before they fall ill. Isolating Ebola patients and following up people who may have been in contact with them will break any epidemic chain. It's easy when the number of cases is low, and for now there are hardly any cases at all in Europe. It's much more difficult when the number of cases grows.
There are people who are afraid of traveling by plane because of Ebola. Is this justified?
As far as I know, there's not been any case of contamination during air travel. Planes offer a relatively hostile environment for viruses, so you can take the plane without any risk of catching Ebola.
According to some research, fruit bats are suspected of being the natural hosts for the Ebola virus, which raises the question about other animals and pets, for example dogs. Can they carry the Ebola virus?
There's been very little research, so we can't dismiss that scenario. However, one study, dating back to 2005, I think, shows that during an epidemic in Gabon, they found dogs that carried antibodies, which meant they'd been in contact with the virus but hadn't developed the disease. So they're probably not hosts for the disease.
Let's talk about a possible vaccine. What's the situation?
I think the first clinical trials are due to start in early 2015. In the meantime, efficiency tests are being carried out on monkeys, bearing in mind that monkeys are good subjects because they're more sensitive than men, so if it works on monkeys, it can work on men. But as far as clinical trials on humans are concerned, it won't be until next year.
How about the pharmaceutical industry? It has been criticized for not spending enough on research on Ebola.
Je pense que les industries pharmaceutiques, comme pour d'autres entités, ont des priorités.
I think that the pharmaceutical industry, like any other industry, has its priorities. When it comes to public health, Ebola until now was not a priority. Until now, the 21 outbreaks of Ebola that have taken place since 1976 have led to fewer than 2,000 deaths. Compare that with the 1.6 million people who died of AIDS and 1.3 million who died of tuberculosis in the world in 2012 alone. Until now, Ebola has claimed less lives than seasonal flu. As there are few patients, it's difficult to carry out research, especially as few laboratories are able to do it.
Donc très difficile de faire des études, avec en plus des études difficiles à faire puisque peu de laboratoires peuvent travailler dessus.